Hello guys, welcome back to Mr. Deep Coding channel. Now this is episode 16 of the Kotlin Multiplatform mobile social media app series. In today's episode, we are going to work on the Android home screen and we will implement two main tasks. The first one is this onboarding section that will normally show up when the user registers or when they log in and they haven't followed anyone yet. And after that, we will look at the post feature. We will implement our own custom pagination to load our post into small chunks, and of course at the end we'll make sure that the like functionality for our post is also implemented. So without further ado, let's get started. Hold on a second. Now guys, when I was recording these videos, my goal was to edit everything in one go, but it turns out that my computer won't let me do that, and that's why in this video we will not start with the onboarding section right away. Rather, we will do the splash screen, and for the most of the part we will migrate our Datastore code to be used for both Android and iOS. Now the remaining part of this episode 16 are coming because everything has been already recorded, so it will not take more than 2 days for each video. Alright, now let's get back to this episode here. Alright guys, now before we actually start with the implementation of the onboarding section, I want us to do two things. First of all, we're going to install the splash screen. If you remember, in the first episode, we included this dependency here, Android X Core splash screen. And after the splash screen, we are going to make our Datastore code multi-platform. In case you don't know it, Datastore is one of few Jetpack libraries that are already migrated to Kotlin Multiplatform, and therefore we can use Datastore for both Android and iOS. Alright, so for the splash screen, we need to come here inside Android module. So here we need to open a main activity view model. Instead of just emitting this out state that just returns the token, we are going to create a main activity UI state. So right below this main activity view model class definition, we need a state interface that is going to have two states, a loading and a success state. For the success case, we will have this current user and object of type user settings. Now coming inside main activity view model, let's remove this out state. Instead, we need to declare a variable that we'll call UI state. This is a state flow of type main activity UI state. Now, since Datastore the data returns a flow, we need to convert that to state flow. And for that, we're going to use the state in extension function. All right, so make sure to import the state in. Okay, now we are done with main activity view model. Let's open main activity.kt file. In the onCreate method, right above the super.onCreate call, we need to create a variable splash screen and call install splash screen function. Now, this install splash screen function comes from the dependency we have included inside our build.gradle.kts file. Below the super.onCreate call, here we are going to define a UI state variable of type main activity UI state, and we set the initial value to main activity UI state.loading. Now, because we are not inside a composable context, we need to launch a new coroutine and call lifecycle repeat on lifecycle API to collect the flow, the user state flow that comes from our main activity view model. And for each emission, we are going to set our UI state. Now, this is not all yet. Below this coroutine launch, here we need to set the condition under which the splash screen is going to be kept on screen. For that, here we'll call splash screen dot set keep on screen condition, and we are going to keep our splash screen for as long as the main activity UI state is in loading state. Alright, now let's open socialapp.kt. Here, instead of just taking the token as parameter for this function, we are going to take UI state. Now scroll down and let's replace this launched effect with this code. So here we have one expression for the UI state. When main activity UI state is loading, we don't do anything. When it's success, here we launch the effect, and inside that we need to first check if the current user token is empty, and if that is the case, then we take our nav host controller and we navigate to the login destination. All right, now coming back inside main activity.kt, here we can get rid of this and instead just pass UI state. Alright, now for the last step, we need to create a splash screen theme that we are also going to set inside our manifest. So come here inside the resource directory. Now in the values directory, we need to create a new XML file that we will name as splash. Now inside this resources tag, we need to create a new style. Now the name will be theme.splash, and the parent is going to be theme.splash screen. Now here I'm just going to use default value. The only thing that I'm going to set here is the post splash screen theme. And for the post splash screen theme, I'm going to use our app theme. Alright, so after this, we need to open now the manifest file. And here we need to change app theme to use splash theme.splash. And because we set the post slash screen theme to app theme, after the splash screen is dismissed, we are going to roll back to our app theme. Alright, I've got my device connected. Let's run and test the splash screen feature. Alright, the app is launching, and as you can see, although this is not a really good icon, feel free to put any icon that you have. Now after the splash screen, now we landed on our home screen. Alright, so the splash screen is working. Alright, now to use Datastore in our shared module, we need to follow some steps. First, in the shared module, open build.gradle.kts file. Now, in the dependencies block of the common main source set, here we need to paste the Android Datastore core library. Of course, we will need this Datastore version, so let's define that right here. Now, to use this Datastore version, we need to update the target version, Android compile SDK version. We need to upgrade that to use the version 34. We can remove this target SDK. Now open build.gradle.kts file of the Android app module. Here we also need to make sure that the target version is updated, the compile SDK version and also the target version. Alright, now here inside the build.gradle.kts file of the Android module, you can scroll and we need to remove this Android X Datastore preferences dependency. Cut that and come here inside the Gradle file of the shared module. Now locate the dependency block of Android main source set. We need to paste this dependency here. Alright, now since we have updated the compile SDK to be 34, we also need to upgrade the Android Gradle plugin version. And for that, you can click here on File and then go to Project Structure. Now here for the Android Gradle plugin version, we need to use at least this version here, 8.1.1. And for the Gradle version also, you can set that to 8.1.1. Then click apply and OK. Alright, now the build is done. Let's close this. Now coming here inside the shared module, let's expand this src folder. Now here in the common package, come in the data package and let's create two folders. The first one, we name it as remote, and we'll create another one, the local. Now we need to move the Skater API class in the remote directory. And then next, we need to move the Android settings.kt file that is here inside the Android app module in the common then Datastore package. So you can drag this user settings.kt into this local directory here. Click OK. Alright, now next we need to move this user settings serializer and we are going to put that inside Android main source set. Now here in the common package or common directory, we need to create a data package. Then we are going to move user settings serializer. Now because this Datastore package in Android app module is empty, delete that. Alright, and now to make sure we haven't broken anything, let's run the application, and if it runs without a problem, then we will continue. Alright guys, now if you run into a compilation error where this Datastore is not being recognized, as it says here, unresolved reference, now you need to do two things. First of all, in the build.gradle.kts file at the project level, make sure that you are using here version 8.1.1 for the com.android.application and also for the com.android.library. Then in the build.gradle.kts file of the shared module, I forgot to mention that here it's not implementation, because if we make it implementation, the Android app module that depends on the shared module will not be able to see this dependency here. So we need to make it as API. Alright, now we can sync the project again. Alright, so this normally should fix this import error or unresolved reference error. Now let's run the app and test. Oh, alright, so here we are getting into another issue, and that is here this should be implementation. This is not what we need to make as API. Instead, it's the Android dependency here inside the Android main. So this is the one that we need to make as API, not the one in the common main source set dependencies block. Okay, so let's again sync the project. All right, now this also should be fixed. Let's run the app now. Alright, so the build was successful and the app is now launching in our device. So alright, so we are still landing here in the home screen. So now we can advance with the refactoring to make our data store work on Android and iOS. Let me close these. Alright, and now next, come here inside shared main, inside common main of the shared module. Now we need to expand this. Now here in the local directory of the data package, we need to create a new Kotlin file. Now we are going to name this as user preferences. Now inside this file, we will need to have an internal interface of the same name, user preferences. Now this interface will define a common interface, of course, for reading and writing to the data store. And it's going to have two methods, one to set the data and the other one to retrieve the data. So here we will have this get user data. It returns user settings, and we have set user data, which takes in user settings to write to the data store. We will provide implementation for each platform in a moment, but before that, above this interface declaration, we need to define here a constant for the preferences file name. So here we will have this app user settings dot preferences underscore pb. This is our preferences file name. Now, keep in mind that you don't necessarily need this extra layer of abstraction. The reason I created this interface user preferences is because on the Android side, I still want to keep the same code we had where we use the Kotlin serialization to serialize and deserialize user settings. Now, since on the iOS side, we cannot use Kotlin serialization, we will manually construct these user settings by getting each preferences key. All right. Now, coming here inside Android main. Now here in the data package, let's create a new Kotlin file. Now we will name this one as Android user preferences. And of course, we are going to create an internal class Android user preferences. This will take a private val a data store. And it should extend user preferences. Now here we need to override the get and set user data. Now for the get user data, we will return the first flow emission. So for that, call datastore.data.first. And for setting user data, we will just call datastore.updateData, and then we need to pass these user settings. Now for the iOS platform, come here inside iOS main. Oops, not there. Inside iOS main, in this common directory, we need to create a data directory first. Then inside this data directory, we are going to create a new Kotlin file, iOS user preferences. And we also need here an internal class iOS user preferences. Now this one will take also a data store. Now this time we cannot pass user settings directly as the type here for data store because we don't have a serializer. So here we just need to pass a data store of type preferences. Now it needs to extend user preferences. All right, and now we will manually implement the get user data and set user data when we will be working on the iOS platform. For now, we can leave it as it is. Now, because of the differences in system APIs between Android and iOS, we need to define how to instantiate a data store object for each platform individually. Now, for the iOS platform, right below this iOS user preferences class, we are going to define a factory method called createDataStore that will create a data store object for the iOS platform. Now, to create this data store object, we will need a database factory and also a database path. We will return preference database factory.create with path. The first argument is corruption handler, and we will pass none. Next, for migrations, we will pass an empty list. And lastly, we need to provide a lambda to produce the system file. Now, this is the code I found from the official documentation. Now, this is how you create a file on the iOS disk. And the only thing you can notice here is this preferences file name that we defined here in user preferences.kt file. Now, don't forget to add the opt-in annotation because this is an experimental API. All right, and now next we need to tell Coin, our dependency injection framework, how to provide user preferences and Datastore instances for each platform. Let's go back inside common main. Come here in the DI folder. Here we need to create a new Kotlin file that we will call platform module. All right, and now in here, we need to declare a variable, an expected variable that we will call platform module. So define this expect val platform module. Now, before we provide actual val platform modules for each platform, let's open shared modules.kt. We need to add this platform module. Okay, now close shared module.kt. Now, to provide the actual platform modules, first, let's go inside Android main source set. Now, make sure that you create a DI package. Now, inside this DI package, we need to create a Kotlin file that should have the same name, platformmodule.kt. All right, now in here, we need an actual platform module. And we need to provide the user preferences implementation. Now for user preferences here on the Android platform, we are going to use this Android user preferences. Now, of course, these Android user preferences need a data store. Now, of course, Android user preferences depends on Datastore. So right below this single user preferences, we also need a way to tell Coin how to create the Datastore instance for the Android platform. We already have that, and come here inside Android app module. Now in the DI package, open appmodule.kt, and we need to move this code here, cut this, and we are going to paste that inside Android main right below the single user preferences. We just need to replace the file name to use preferences file name constant we created. All right, and now we need to provide actual implementation for the iOS platform. So let's go inside iOS main. Now here we need to do the same thing. First, create a DI directory. And in this DI directory, we need to create platform module. Here also we need actual platform module. All right, now for user preferences, we will use iOS user preferences. And since iOS user preferences also has a dependency on the data store, right below here, we need to call a single and then create a data store, the factory function we created a moment ago. All right, that's it. We have moved now data store to be used for both Android and iOS. Let's close all these opened files. Now we need to go inside auth repository implementation. Auth repository implementation is located here inside common main under the auth then data directory. So open this auth repository implementation. Now here we need to pass user preferences, private val user preferences. Yeah, this one. Now coming here inside the sign up method, when the result is success and we have retrieved auth result.data. Now here we need to call user preferences.set user data. So call user preferences.set user data. Now here we need to call auth response.data and to user settings. Okay, actually we don't have a mapper function, but we have this mapper function to auth results data, and we can call to user settings. Now, of course, normally we should have created a mapper function to map this data to user settings directly. We don't need to pass to auth result data. But anyway, here let's just test that everything is working. So we need to do the same for the sign-in method. Now come here in the sign-in method when auth response data is not null. Here also we need to call user preferences.set user data. All right, now after doing this, we need to make sure that we provide this user preferences to the auth repository implementation. So here we just need to call the get function again, like that. All right, so after doing this, now we need to go inside Android app in the sign in and in the login and sign up. Yep, here open login viewmodel.kt. And this is where we were writing to the data store. We need to remove this code here. When the sign-in was successful, we were writing to the data store here at the view model level. Now we need to do the same, open sign up viewmodel.kt. Here also we need to remove this and we can get rid of this. Let's do the same for login view model. Alright guys, now to run and test our application, we need to make sure that our PostgreSQL is running. So make sure you open your Postgre if it's not open already. And then you need to run your server code. And in my case, this is the Ktor app project. So we need to run the server code. All right, and now once your server is running, the next thing that you need to do is to get the IP address of the computer running your Ktor server project. And for me, it's the same computer, so I will go and get the IP address of this computer here. Since I'm connected via the Wi-Fi, and I will come here in details. So you need to copy, for example, this IP address here. Then you need to go inside the shared module and in the common source set, come in the common directory. Let me close this. Okay. Now in the remote directory of the data directory, open Ktor API and you need to paste your IP address here before the port. Okay, now you can run your Android app. Alright, now the app has launched and we landed on the login screen here. So I'm going to log in with a Mr. Deep account. So I will type here mrdeep@gmail.com and the password was Mr. Deep password, I guess. Okay, let's try to log in. Okay, invalid credentials, wrong password. Maybe we need to try 1 2 3 4 5. I don't know if I changed the password. Yeah, that was actually the password. Okay, so now we are connected and we have successfully logged in with Mr. Deep. I will minimize the app and close it. And let's try to open the app again. If we don't go to the login screen, it means setting user data was successful to the data store. So as you can see, we landed on the home screen. All right, so that's it. We have successfully moved our data store code now to be multi-platform, and we have the common interface user preferences for reading and writing to the data store for both Android and iOS. Now, the next part, we will proceed with this onboarding section, and that is going to come in the video 16 part 2.